Hey guys, it's Candace.
And it's Elena.
And you're listening to Cousins on Crime. Sounded like creme. Cousins on creme. Creme de la creme.
Creme brulee.
Ooh, I could go for that. Oh, wait, that's not the song. I can't go for that.
You're making your own stuff.
Oh, my Lord.
Yeah.
It's approaching 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
So.
We late today.
Yeah. Lena, last week's episode, I have not been able to wash off of me.
Yeah.
I still feel dirty about it.
I know.
So this case is very different. I think you will make your own conclusion about what happened. I've made mine.
Okay.
However, I am not going to let it skew my telling of the story.
Okay.
I'm going to give you all the facts as I learned them. And at the end, I might tell you my opinion because I can do that. I'm not an attorney and there are no rules.
Okay.
And I'm the one talking. So
yeah. So you own this.
I can
okay.
tell my opinion if I want. This case is a doozy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a doozy. So this case is about the mysterious death of Jane Neumann.
Okay.
Do you know the name? You kind of looked like you have heard of the name.
Her name sounds familiar, but go for it and tell me.
Well, Jane Neumann lived in Hudson, Wisconsin with her husband, Jim, and their 21-month-old son, Jonathan, who they called Johnny. She adored her son, as, you know, most parents do that aren't throwing their kids into a trash can, like I just heard about. Ugh, I just can't even. She was very close to her parents and her siblings. She had a brother and two sisters. She's described by her friends and family as being positive and upbeat, genuinely kind and gentle. Her husband, Jim, who had served in the military, was very loving, and they really just seemed like the perfect fit. 48 Hours did an episode on this case, and it was really old, but they showed old home movies, and they just look so happy together and cute and like joking around, and you can just tell there was a lot of love there. Her mother said in that 48 Hours interview that she was very happy with Jim, and they seem to have had a really healthy relationship, and they spent a lot of time together, like Jim and Jane, but they also spent a lot of time together with their families.
Okay.
Particularly her family. So her family got to know him really well and see a lot of them together.
Okay.
Just like when you go, you know, most of the time you bring Chris along, most of the time I bring Daniel along.
Right.
It's like you see a couple together all the time.
Yeah.
And you just kind of get to know them.
I feel like that's how it should be, but
I do too.
Yeah.
So when they first got together, Jane's family thought Jim was a little bit quiet. And it was funny because her mom said in an interview, she's like, I'm going to break him out of his shell.
Oh.
And it just reminded me of our family.
Right.
Like when Taylor brought her boyfriend to Hazel's party. And I was like, what did she offer you in return for coming here today?
Yeah.
Because you've walked into craziness.
Yeah.
But it just reminded me of our family, like, and he did open up over the years. I think that's another thing about our family is that you just kind of get drawn into it. And so they started to see another side of him. He became really comfortable with them. And Jane and Jim both worked full time. Jane worked at a mortgage company and Jim worked in computer systems at a place called MedSource. But after 6 years of seemingly blissful marriage, their perfect journey together would come to a screeching halt.
Mm-hmm.
Or else we wouldn't be here right now.
Right.
So November 22nd, 1993.
Okay.
Weren't we in the 90s?
Last week. We were.
Here we go. A call came into 911 from a seemingly distraught man, Jim Neumann.
Mm-hmm.
He told dispatch that he had just found his wife dead and his son was missing.
Uh-oh.
So the 911 operator asked if he'd like an ambulance sent to his home. And his response wasn't really clear in the 911 call, but she just was like, why do you think she's dead? And he said, because her whole head is missing.
Oh, okay.
And he explained to the operator that she'd apparently been shot in the head.
Oh, my Lord.
So she asked him if it looked self-inflicted. And he said, well, there wasn't a gun present. So it suggested to them that there might be a murder on their hands.
Right. I mean, because no gun, like how would she have shot herself?
She wouldn't have been able to hide a gun. Police arrived at 895 Trout Brook Road just 4 minutes after Jim placed that 911 call, and they found him outside in the front yard waiting for them. He told officers that he'd last spoken to Jane just before 4 p.m., and the phone call was a typical marriage phone call. Mm-hmm. She got home, the garage door wasn't working. She called him to see if he could help her figure it out. Then she noticed a sliding glass door was unlocked.
Oh.
So she's like, did you leave the door unlocked? Now the garage isn't working. So it just reminds me of like a typical. And
it's all your fault.
You know, this is 1993. Mm-hmm. Okay. She's not out there on her cell phone, walking out to the garage, getting a play-by-play, and she can't tell him. So he was like, go back out there, call me right back, try and tell me like what's actually going on with the garage. Explain it in detail. When you push the button, is it not going all the way up? Is it going, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So she's like, okay, I'll be right back. I'll call you right back. She never called him back. Mm-hmm. So he said that he called her back multiple times and never got an answer. When police approached the house, they saw that the front door had been broken into. The jamb of the door was kind of splintered, so there had been a substantial amount of force to make entry into the home. However, they didn't find any evidence of a robbery when they got inside. There was no ransacking of anything. They kind of had to look around. There's no drawers open or anything. What's more, I love when Keith Morrison uses that word. Her purse was sitting right there on the sofa next to her body.
Okay.
It was closed and sitting upright and didn't appear to have been rifled through. Mm-hmm. Authorities started getting that inkling that some things weren't just lining up with Jim's story. So 2 days after Jane was found dead, Jim was brought in for questioning again. They talked to him that night. So they're like, we need to talk to him one more time. Lena, something really unexpected happened during that interview.
Okay. Do tell.
So he was confronted with all this evidence that they're like, there was no intruder. It looks like a break-in, but it wasn't. Like,
right.
There was no reason. And he changed his story.
Oh, gosh.
What do you think he changed his story to?
I don't know.
Well, you're never going to guess what he changed his story to. Because you're probably thinking, well, maybe he just confessed and was like, okay,
I wouldn't think that he would just confess. No, like he's in this. I think.
No, he didn't confess to committing the crime. He said Jane killed herself.
Okay.
The police were just as puzzled as you look right now, and they're like, how so? Because as I said before, they didn't find a weapon on scene.
Right.
How could she get rid of a weapon if her head is blown off? Pardon me for being blunt. So he kind of said, let me tell you what really happened.
Okay, please do.
Yeah, tell us, Jim. Tell us what really happened. He said when he arrived home from work just before 6 p.m. and when he walked through the door, he could smell gunpowder. And after calling out for Jane and getting no response, he proceeded through the house to find her. And that's when he saw the light on in the laundry room. The door was shut. So he slowly opened the door, expecting maybe to find her in there. But instead, he found a shotgun on the floor.
Right.
With some fishing line tied to it.
Oh.
Tied to the trigger. He then noticed a bullet hole in the wall up above.
Okay.
So he was like, okay. So he went around to the adjacent room. And that's when he found Jane. She was lying dead on the floor. Near Jane's body was a suicide note. Remember, this is what Jim said really happened.
Okay.
So he says there was a suicide note next to her. It mentioned she was not feeling adequate enough for Jim or their young son. She said something to the effect of, I hope you can find someone better than me to raise him. Oh, and it also mentioned that he could go ahead and just cash out her life insurance policy.
Okay.
And pay off their debts.
Yeah, here you go.
You know, he'll be better off. We don't know exactly what that suicide note says because Jim said he burned it in the furnace.
Oh, if there really was a suicide note.
What about the gun? Police said they didn't find a gun at the scene. So what have you done with the gun?
Right.
Did you do something with it? Well, Jim had an explanation for that as well. He said that he couldn't have her family knowing that she took her own life.
How kind of you.
Because, you know what, her suicide note also said something about her wanting to be remembered for being thin and pretty.
Oh my goodness.
Which is kind of curious because she blew her head off.
Right.
So, and I saw the crime scene photo. She doesn't look pretty in that. So,
oh my gosh.
Anyhow, he says he didn't want anyone to find out that because he feared that would be more devastating than thinking that she'd been killed by an intruder. So he says he, in an instant, ran back into the laundry room, gathered the gun, loaded it into a plastic bag, I think a trash bag, and drove out to the St. Croix River and dumped it. He says he then returned home. He sat down for a second next to her body and then said, I got to get rid of this note. And just about that time, the furnace kicked on and he thought, oh, burn it in the furnace.
Yeah.
So he burned it in the furnace. He hung up a photo over that hole in the wall.
Oh.
Because, you know, on the other side of the hole in the laundry room, there's a hole in that wall too. So he hangs up a picture and that's when he called 911.
That's quick thinking, man.
He is a quick thinker, I'll tell you. I'm sure police were like, so when does your fiction novel come out? Jim?
Right.
Because let us know. We want a signed copy. Because what a wild tale. I mean, isn't that wild? Well, the medical examiner reported that Jane died of an intraoral gunshot wound. Pink bubble wrap and black electrical tape were found in her brain.
Oh.
So those items were also found at the scene around the area of her body, around the room, next to her brain matter.
Oh my gosh.
Blood, her teeth.
What in the world?
So he was definitely thinking that the gun was in her mouth when it went off. So with the medical examiner's findings and Jim's new story, a theory was beginning to emerge for law enforcement. They believed Jane made a hole in that wall, put the end of the gun through the hole and propped it up somehow, tied fishing line to the trigger, threaded it through another hole in the wall, went around to the other room, and then said, okay, I'm going to wrap bubble wrap around it, then tied it off with electrical tape. Then she put the gun in her mouth, holding it with her right hand, reached over with her left hand and pulled the fishing line. And that's how she died.
But
they knew, they came up with this theory because she had materials on her hand, her right hand. Oh. So they believed that she was touching the end of the gun when it went off.
Okay.
So they believed she was securing that with her right hand and reached over with her left hand to pull the trigger or the string tied to the trigger. As extraordinary as Jim's story was, investigators ruled her death a suicide. They didn't have the gun. They didn't have a note. They didn't have anything.
Nothing to corroborate except for the bubble wrap.
Yeah.
And the hole in the wall.
Yeah. And that's the end of the story. I'm just kidding. What if it was? People would be turning over tables. Well, Jane's family felt there was no way she would take her own life. Her family said she was happy and upbeat and never gave any indication that she would kill herself. There was no indication to say she didn't want to live anymore. I mean, I think a lot of families say this about their loved ones who really do take their own life. And it's hard to imagine that someone that you love or you feel like you know that well would do something like that without asking for help or giving an indication that things were that bad. Some people hide their mental health really well. Their mental health struggles, that is. And that's precisely what Jim said she did. He said she was wonderful and gentle and kind and loved her son, and she was a loving person, but she also had a different side to her. Jim actually told his parents after she died that Jane would cry every night, and she struggled with deep depression and insecurities and just never felt like she measured up to anyone's expectations of this perfect wife and mother and sister, daughter, and friend that she felt like she needed to be. He alleged that she heard voices and struggled with bulimia. And he said that she hid that from everyone except for him. But as time went on and Jane's family learned more and more details about the circumstances surrounding her death, the more they became really confused. And that confusion led them to be convinced that this was not a suicide at all. Like things were just, the more they learned, the more confused they were. And they're like, I feel like in that kind of scenario, the more you learn, the more at peace you would become. Oh, wow. Okay. We didn't know. She was really struggling. But things were like, no, everything they heard, they just could not let it go. So one day, Jane's mother was sort of milling around. She's flipping through papers and she comes across this old newspaper and she sees this article about a husband who had his wife killed. And in order to pull it off, he got rid of the family dog so that someone could come into the home and do the deed without the dog being there. She felt an ice cold chill run down her spine because several weeks before Jane died, Jim took their dog, Molly, to the shelter and dropped her off.
Y'all, I've got chills right now. Wow.
So Jim's explanation for this, come to find out, we learn, is that they had just put in new carpet and Molly kept peeing all over the carpet. So they just got rid of her.
He's just got a likely story for everything.
I know. Jane's family urged police to reopen the case. They're like, we need you to take a second look at the evidence or lack of evidence, physical or circumstantial.
Yeah, come on, guys.
So they went to that shelter, the police, and it was true. Jim did drop off the dog weeks before Jane's death, but the paperwork raised some curiosities, if you will. There was a section on the paperwork that said, like, why are you rehoming this dog or why are you dropping this dog off? And the reason that Jim gave was that his owner had died. The dog's owner had died. This was weeks before Jane was killed. This reminds me of Scott Peterson telling his mistress that his wife died before, when she was just missing. What about Jim's story, though? Because I feel like he said a lot of stuff that could potentially be verified. Like, were there remnants of a burned note in the furnace? Like, did they look there?
Yeah.
I don't know. Did they look in the river to find the gun? His timeline, etc.? Well, they did search the river, but they didn't find anything. And I'd like to note here, according to an article written by Linda Henry with the Minneapolis St. Paul magazine in 1997, they did search that river for 3 hours I'm not a river searcher extraordinaire, so I don't know how long you're supposed to search. I don't know how long it takes to search a river.
But where?
I don't know.
Did he say where he dumped it?
He did.
Was there a current?
3 hours just...
I mean,
they said it was a thorough search, so maybe it was. Maybe it was a thorough search, and that's the point. There was no gun found.
There's no.
I couldn't find information whether or not they looked in the furnace. I don't even know if they would have found anything in there, but I feel like it's a furnace, so there shouldn't be paper in there.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So or anything
ash.
For that matter, if there was ash at all, that might have confirmed his story. Well, they did reanalyze the timeline of events. Jim's timeline left 25 minutes to do all that staging from the time he found Jane to the time he called 911. He would have had to decide to cover it up in an instant.
Yeah.
He would have had to find her and go, no, not like this. So he would have had to read the suicide note, get the gun, take it in the plastic bag, put the gun in there, go to his car, drive to the river, drive back, all of that in 25 minutes. Now, I don't have the luxury of knowing what the roads or traffic was like back in 1993 at 6 p.m. But I took to Google Maps to see what I could uncover. At the top of the episode, I gave their address, which was 895 Trout Brook Road. I mapped their home address to the overpass he says that he drove to, and it gave me a time about 8 minutes.
Okay.
I personally think that at that time of evening, because it was a work day, he himself was coming home from work. Jane had worked that day. I think at 6 p.m. anywhere on this planet, during a work day, there would still be remnants of traffic.
Yeah.
But let's give him the benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
Let's say there was no traffic at all. Everybody took the day off. Let's say that. Let's say it took him 8 minutes without traffic to drive from his house to the overpass.
Okay.
Cool. But wait, he said he pulled over on the access road, climbed the 4-foot fence that lined the river, ran the rest of the length of the access road up the embankment and reached the overpass. Then he ran across the bridge to the middle of the bridge and threw the gun into the water at the middle of the bridge. And I did a Google screenshot and I'm going to post it on our Instagram so you can see what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Now, the distance itself from where he pulled over to where the middle of the bridge was is not too far of a distance, but logistically this may take some time to do.
Gonna run down, gonna run up, yeah.
He had to climb a fence, run up a hill, and then across, half of the bridge. Let's say he's Usain Bolt.
Okay.
We're giving him more benefits of the doubt. Let's say he is Usain Bolt and he runs extremely fast and he jumped that fence.
Yeah.
Like it was a hurdle.
Sure.
No big deal. Okay. It still would have taken some amount of time. Let's say 5 minutes.
Sure. Okay.
That's
really giving it to him. Yeah.
Okay. Let's say 5 minutes to do all that. It'll probably take me 30. But Usain Bolt. Okay. So now he has to go from whence he came.
Right.
Okay.
So that's another 5 minutes.
That's another 5 minutes to go back down the hill, down to his car, and then another 8 minutes home. By my calculations, and you guys know I'm not a mathematician, but 8 plus 5 plus 5 plus 8 is 26.
Okay. Thank you for telling me that.
You're welcome. I even checked it on my calculator. 26 minutes, and we've given him the benefit of the doubt big time.
Right.
Listen, I'm not trying to convince you of anything, but 26 is more than 25, right?
I believe so.
Again, not a mathematician. I have, basic math skills. I'm just checking. I wanted to verify with you that was more. And that doesn't leave any time for anything else.
No, hanging pictures or...
No time to pee, blow your nose, I don't know, tie your shoe. You did just scale a fence twice. Mm-hmm. So this whole thing blows the 25-minute timeline out of the water. Mm-hmm. Seems pretty impossible.
It really does.
Okay, police might have thought that too, but it didn't seem to matter much because without the evidence that he did anything wrong, they're still maintaining that same position of, we don't have anything against the guy. And they may think his story is wild too, but the physical evidence they had kind of did support the suicide theory, as wild as it may have been. Jim also took a polygraph, which he passed.
Polygraph.
Schmollygraph. That's a beautiful name. Can you imagine? Oh, she's beautiful. What's her name? Schmolly. We call her Schmolly.
Schmall.
Oh, my Lord. And even though he was receiving a lot of pressure from Jane's family, Eric Johnson, the DA at the time, said, I'm not going to take a case to trial that I can't win. Because,
but this was somebody's life that was taken.
That's the way our justice system works,
You're
though.
Exactly right.
If there's no evidence to suggest that a person committed a crime, you can't convince 12 people that they did commit that crime. And it's a good thing. I don't want to be hauled off and put on trial for something I didn't do with no evidence of it. I appreciate that. So they were also told by Wisconsin's Division of Criminal Investigation that it would be very difficult to uncover new evidence since months had passed at this point. Yeah. Jim admitted to getting rid of evidence. He got rid of the gun.
Tampering
he altered
with
the
evidence.
Scene.
There is a such thing.
He hung a picture over a bullet hole.
What in the world?
He busted the door down to make it look like. Yes.
Wow.
So, he was convicted of evidence tampering. He pled no contest to that. So he did get in a little bit of trouble. I couldn't find if he served any jail time. I don't think it was that type of thing. I think it was a slap on the wrist, but he did cash out Jane's $116,000 life insurance policy, and he proceeded on with his life. He got a nanny for his son, and he ended up marrying the nanny.
Okay.
A year later.
A year.
Mm-hmm. These men can't stay single, Lena. They got to have a woman in their lives. Well, that wasn't good enough for Jane's family. They're like, okay, that's it? You're just going to let this lie?
No.
This is the most insane thing I've ever heard of. So in 1996, 3 years after her death, they took Jim to civil court and sued him for wrongful death.
Okay.
As people do when, law enforcement refuses to press charges and you've got all this evidence. Since the DA was not planning to bring criminal charges against him, they insisted that they just wanted justice. They were seeking monetary gains from this, but they really just wanted to know what happened to her. And the trial was revealing in a lot of ways. By now, like I said, Jim had remarried, and they had a 4-month-old baby girl together that they had added to their family along with Jonathan. Mm-hmm. At the trial, Jim sat mostly stoic at the defense table, and many supporters sat behind him. Many people believed him. The Johnstons, who's Jane's family, their attorney, Mark Garrity, told the jury that Jim wasn't at all the guy he portrayed himself to be, to anyone.
Okay.
Mark said that Jim, quote, felt it necessary to embellish who he was, end quote. The first example he wanted to give to the jury was Jim's military career. I mentioned that he was a military man. Well, Jim told his coworkers that he was a Secret Service agent.
Okay.
and that he had fought in the Persian Gulf War. He also told them that he led a secret life and that he was sometimes asked to do really dangerous stuff that he did not want to do. The government had a hold of him.
Is he reading?
I'm telling you, this guy. He did no such things. Jim even lied under oath in a deposition after Jane's death.
Of course he did.
Claiming that he had top government security clearance. He had nothing of the sort.
Okay. Does he not realize they can figure this out?
But this is the thing about people who are compulsive liars, Lena. They live in their own reality. We have all known these people. You're just like, I could easily verify that. Like, I could easily find that out. And they don't care.
No.
It's real to them. Anyway, that's my soapbox. So Jim told his boss, this is probably the most concerning and weirdest thing. Jim told his boss, and his boss explained this to the jury, that Jim told them the night he found Jane dead, there was a bomb connected to that laundry room door.
Okay.
And in order to open the door, he had to disarm the bomb.
Oh, Lord.
He also said there was no gun when he opened the door. So he was very confused. And his boss was like, well, like, I guess he pressed him further and said, how would she have been shot?
Right.
If there was no gun? And Jim said something like, well, someone could have held a knife to her neck and led her over to the wall where the gun was located.
Okay. But where's the gun?
Right. Isn't that weird? That's just weird.
Yeah. Because all of a sudden there's a new thing. It's a bomb.
know. Well, that's just a weird story to tell your boss. Again, could easily be verified. Like, that is the type of thing that would come out in the news.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, in addition to this grandiose lying, because that's just what it was, Jim's behavior after Jane's death was, well, inappropriate. Jane's sister testified that Jim told her the worst part about losing Jane was losing the sex.
Oh, my
Don't you
Lord.
hate when your wife dies and you just like don't get to have sex anymore with your wife?
What?
Wow.
He's gross.
I can't even. And a few of Jim's female coworkers had pretty much the same thing to say about him. Just inappropriate subject matter. Something that really, like, just things that he said that made them really uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. So Mark Garrity, the Johnstons' attorney, also argued that to believe Jane killed herself is to believe she planned to do that. She planned all of this.
Well, she would have had to, the way it was all supposedly set up.
Exactly. Seems like, I mean, this woman is not an engineer. Okay. This, to me, this is so uncharacteristic. Even if she did want to kill herself, this whole elaborate thing is very bizarre.
It really just does not make sense why anybody would choose that way.
Yeah. Well, like her family, her friend from work said she was really happy that day. In fact, so her and her friend from work, they used to, like, on their lunch breaks, go walk. You know, like they'd have their lunch and then they'd go walk around on their lunch break and then go back to work. So she spent a lot of time with her, and that day was no different. Jane was in a really good mood, and actually the strap on her purse had broken. So she was like, I've got to go to TJ Maxx on my way home and exchange this. Like, this dinky old thing already broke. So anyway, she did. She went to TJ Maxx on her way home.
Okay.
Got that new purse. And sure enough, that's the purse that was sitting right there next to her body.
So why would you go purchase something that you could have in the future if you weren't planning on having a future?
Why would you care about a broken strap on your purse if you're just going to go home and kill yourself anyways?
No.
Maybe some people would do that, but I don't think that would be the first thing on your mind. What about the bulimia and the voices, the mental health, the difficulties she was supposedly suffering? Well, she did have bulimia in college.
Mm-hmm.
And while that's not no big deal, okay, that is a big deal. And there are lots of psychological, issues that are often present with an eating disorder. She hadn't struggled with that in a very long time.
Yeah.
And she'd actually been in therapy for a year before her death. She took a job as a graphic designer at MedSource, where Jim worked.
Oh.
And she worked there for a brief amount of time before she was laid off. And that event happened months before she died. But she had a really hard time with that layoff. And I mean, who wouldn't? So she ended up going to therapy, and she seemed to really be overcoming that, getting better. You remember when I told you about investigator Candace Van Wade, who did that Google map search?
Yeah, that was very good investigative work.
I mean, she brings
smart.
A lot to the table. The how could that be all accomplished in 25 minutes? Well, the jury was loaded up in a bus.
Okay.
And they were taken from the Neumann residence.
Let's go on a field trip.
Yes, exactly. To the place where he says he parked off his car.
Mm-hmm.
They saw the fence. They saw the distance from there to the place. They walked the distance all the way. They didn't hop the fence.
Okay.
But they walked on the outside of I guess, would it be the inside of the fence?
Okay, right.
And it just wasn't possible in 25 minutes. I think the strongest argument made at the trial that Mark Gertie made was when he mocked the method of this supposed suicide. He wheeled out a wall.
Okay.
Paneling and all. Paneling was all the rage. So it was a replica just like the wall was. And actually, just a little side note, the wall on the laundry room side was just framing and then the back of the paneling, if that makes sense.
Okay.
There was no sheetrock it wasn't finished. It wasn't like a finished room.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And I'll post pictures so you can kind of get a visual. But the replica of the wall that he wheeled out was the exact same. So he illustrated just how Jane would have done this. Just how she would have accomplished this.
Yeah.
He pretended to be Jane. He said, okay, well, I'm going to kill myself. Okay. Here I go. What to do? I know. I'll make a hole in this wall and then I'll put a shotgun through it. Mm-hmm. Here I go. And so he grabs a hammer and he hammers a hole and he's like, okay. He gets his gun. He's got a shotgun and he threads it through and then he walks around the other side. I know. I'll wrap the end of this in bubble wrap. Let me just do that right now. So he wraps it in bubble wrap. He wraps the tape around. Yeah, this looks legit. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Here I go. Oh, the fishing line.
How am I going to pull the trigger?
I got to get that. Oh, let me make another hole. So he goes through this whole thing and it really does do for the jury what he intended it to do, because they're sitting there silly, basically rolling their eyes. Like if this was in a movie or you read this in a book, you'd go, that's
stupid.
Mm-hmm. Nobody would do that. That's not even appropriate for a movie.
Yeah.
So when it was the defense's turn, they presented the medical examiner to discuss his findings at Jane's autopsy. He ruled it a suicide and he explained that. They put Jim on the stand, of course, to testify to her mental health struggles. They even put Jane's pastor up to talk about some conversations he had with her, like her crying about her insecurities. And so what? that was pretty much it for the defense. Oh, and he put his new wife up there.
Oh, what does she have to say? What is she?
Literally, his attorney said, "Do you believe your husband?" She said, "Yes." And he said, "Do you love your husband?" And she goes, "I love him to death." And he's like, "Thank you very much for your time." So she gets back down. But it was pointless, I guess, just to say that she believed him.
Okay.
The defense really didn't do much. Like I said, Jim was the star witness for the defense, and he was the person on trial here. Now, the jury in the civil trial had seen and heard enough.
Yeah.
They found Jim guilty of Jane's murder. Mm-hmm. They were sus about most of it, but there was a fisherman on the jury.
Oh.
And he said she likely wouldn't have been able to pull the fishing line hard enough because he said it's quite slippery. He said, when you're working with fishing line, you usually have to wrap it around your finger.
Okay, yeah.
To like tie knots and thread it through. And he said that gunshot blast blew her out of her shoes.
Oh,
her shoes were blown, like she was blown out of her shoes. He said if she had that wire wrapped around her finger, it would have ripped her finger off.
Yeah.
Her hands were pristine.
Okay.
Other than blood spatter. But they made, one of the things that police noted was like there was no intruder, there was no struggle. Oh, she killed herself because there's nothing under her fingernails. She had painted red fingernails and her hands were pristine. One of the very things that they pointed out is like, well, her hands were pristine. Like she had no evidence of
a string pulling her finger.
Right, exactly. So she had no, and say it didn't rip her finger off, maybe it would have damaged it at some point, caused an abrasion or whatever. So I think him bringing that to the table and talking about that was what really led them to all go, and that just like tipped everybody over the edge, I think. But the order of judgment was for $482,903.26 in damages.
Okay.
Which would go to his son Jonathan, who was the statutory beneficiary of Jane's estate. He was, I think there was another judgment on top of that of like $5 million, and he appealed, and that one was taken off, I think. And then this one, this was the amount that he was, that was upheld. And it's to be held in a trust until his 18th birthday, Jonathan's 18th birthday. Now get this. After the wrongful death verdict, the medical examiner changed the cause of death from suicide to homicide.
Oh.
I bet you're getting a little tingling in your loins thinking that, there's going to be an arrest. There was no arrest.
No.
Again, the St. Croix district attorney said, not enough evidence to convict. And I hope I said that like Buzz said it in Home Alone. But Mark Gertie, the Johnson's attorney, said, pardon?
Yeah.
We just convinced 12 people in a civil trial. Why can't we present all this evidence in a criminal trial and let another 12 people decide? Why are we saying there's
like
not enough?
Her life isn't worth your time or effort.
Yeah. And it's not like they were actively working the case and going, we're onto something. We just need to get more evidence and then we'll arrest him. Nobody was doing that.
No.
That wasn't
they
happening.
Washed their hands.
Exactly. It's very frustrating. And I get the whole, like, we don't want to go to trial, lose the case, and then never be able to try that person again.
Right.
No, nobody wants that. But to say, well, we don't have enough evidence. You're not saying we don't have enough evidence now, but we're working on it.
Right.
Because nobody was doing that.
Well, get your evidence.
And they even said to uncover more evidence, would be highly unlikely. I mean, he admitted to tampering and disposing of evidence. So, who killed Jane?
I think it was Jim.
I think it was Jim. Her family believes that someone was in there waiting for her when she got home. Had the whole thing set up. She got home. They led her out down to that. It was like a split level home.
Okay. I just wonder if, like you said, she had residue on her hands from the gun. Did she see the barrel sticking out of this hole in her room and grabbed the barrel? Like, what is this? And it just...
Well, it was in her mouth.
It was in
her mouth when it went off.
He stuck it in her mouth and she grabbed the barrel at some point. Like...
You'd grab it and try to get it out of your mouth.
Yeah. Wow.
And she was very close to the wall. So the evidence does point to the gun being through the wall and her having her mouth over the gun facing the wall. I know it sounds really strange, but I don't think she did it to herself.
No.
Here's another thing that came out at trial. Jim said he called her back like 10 times. Okay. And that was on the call logs, but he said he had an answering machine. I've never heard of this, but he said he had an answering machine where you could listen to the room.
Okay.
1993, that seems really advanced.
Right.
But he said he kept calling back to see if he could hear her in the room. Like if he could hear anything.
I'm going to have to research
in the room.
that.
I know. I was like, never heard of that in my life, but I also was a child in 1993, so I don't know why that would have been something I knew about. But the plaintiff's attorney, the family's attorney, he says he was likely calling to listen to see when the job was done.
Oh.
He was likely calling to hear if she was home yet, if when she got home, and if it was... What about the garage door and the sliding door being left open?
Right.
Neither of those things were ever really explored. Was the garage door intentionally broken?
Right.
So that it wouldn't go all the way down? Why was the glass sliding door left unlocked?
And I mean, the glass sliding door is just, I don't think there would be much to come from that because, I mean, it happens.
It happens.
But the garage door not working, if they really even did have that conversation, was the garage door broke? Did the police find that it was broken? Wow. It's
a wild tale. And if he hadn't been such a freaking weirdo, like
all the lies,
the grandiose lies is what does it for me.
Yeah.
That's what it is for me, because that type of pathology is someone who their reality isn't good enough. Is not good enough. And they have to do whatever they can to just live in this fantasy world.
The fact that the prosecution or the prosecutor can't even he's just like, this guy's a liar. Okay, whatever. That's crazy.
All the
to me.
lying. I mean, I've seen people taken to trial for less.
Yeah, absolutely. But what I find fascinating is what we talked about last week in our case last week about divine intervention. Like her mother finding the newspaper about the dog.
Can you imagine being her mother and
my gosh.
feeling like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Having that realization and just having that coincidence, learning of that.
Yeah. I mean, that seems like a divine intervention. It's like God's like, here you go, read this. Like, this is important.
Wow. whoa.
Yeah.
And it's so sad to me because you're dealing with family.
Mm-hmm.
I think of, what if I died and my family thought Daniel did it, and we have children, and now we're ripped apart and my family never sees my kids. And like, you're talking about real people.
Like this. Yeah.
And it's so sad. And just to hear how devoted Jane was to her son and to Jim. She loved Jim. And I think the insecurities came from all women most women, I think, and most mothers, most caregivers, we feel like we have everybody on our plate and we just want to
do good for
everything for everybody. And then when you're fatigued and you can't do everything for everybody, you beat yourself up about it.
Yeah.
And you feel like you're not doing enough.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that every day. So yeah, maybe she did have insecurities in that department.
Right.
And we've talked about this before. Not everybody who's depressed kills themselves.
Right.
There's a lot of people out there that struggle with depression on a daily basis. And I don't know how she would have hid clinical depression from anyone.
Yeah.
Clinical depression, I'm talking you can't get out of bed.
Right.
You could get out of bed, you go through the motions, but people notice.
Yeah.
You're operating like a robot. And I just think that she did find joy in life. It's just, what? Like a gun poking through the wall with bubble wrap?
Yeah. No, it doesn't make sense.
It's so bizarre.
And so he's just out living his life.
Yeah.
Does he? Okay.
With the nanny. And the last thing I heard, the most recent article I could find about this case was 2018. And it was really just the same, I don't know what he's up to these days, but it's not.
Or if he even has a relationship with Jonathan. Like, does Jonathan trust his dad?
I'm sure he does. Cases like this when the mother's murdered or the father and they're raised by the other parent and they just think their parent can do no wrong, this one is so perplexing to me.
Yeah.
Like the most curious thing of all is how they never brought charges against this guy.
Yeah. Because her life mattered.
Yeah.
She had people in her life that loved her, and he just threw it away.
And she was talking, Thanksgiving was in like a week or so, and she had talked to her mom that morning about, plans. Oh, you know what? I don't think I have enough yams. I probably need to go grab some more of those. And she had plans for the future. And I'm not saying that people can't make plans for the future and then kill themselves. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying everything taken together.
Yeah.
All of it taken together indicates to me that she was looking forward. Her sister even said that she wanted to have another baby. Aww. She wanted to give Jonathan a sibling. Wow. So this one's rough. I feel like this is second week in a row your brain probably hurts. Yeah. And I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Maybe we can make it a little better next week. Probably not, because it's
crime.
Cousins on Crime.
Yeah. You know what? My next case may not even be about murder. It may just be about
who knows,
weird things.
Yeah.
And actual just crime, but not murder. Yeah. I don't know. Let's change it up, because
I know
the last 2 weeks were rough.
It's been rough. It's been rough. It's been really rough. But thanks for hanging in there, guys. We love your devotion.
Yes, thank you.
And we're hopelessly devoted to you.
Wow. Sing it, girl.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways. But will you guys write us and tell us what you think? Because I feel like I want to have more of a conversation with people that are not just us, because I feel like we are on the same wavelength.
Yeah,
I would love to hear another perspective, though. I would love for someone to write in and say, no, I could totally see how this would have been a suicide or whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
all opinions are welcome.
It's not weird that she planned all that.
Yeah, it's not weird. Please tell me how it's not weird.
Yeah. I'm sure there are people out there that feel that. So, yeah, please let us know.
I consider myself a very weird person. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm very understanding about a lot of weird things.
Yeah, I can agree to that.
This is beyond anything I can get to.
Yeah.
And I'm glad, because I think that's exciting to know that I cannot relate to this. I mean, there's a reason why we're curious about these things, but we cannot bring ourselves to understand it. Mm-hmm. That's a good thing, actually.
Yeah.
We'll never understand it. Anyways, let's go. Oh, let's do our thankful.
Okay. What are you thankful for?
Chicken Express.
Oh, is it too late to get it?
I think so. It's 10:34.
Oh, were you planning on getting it when you left here?
No, but I just thought of it and I was like, man, I've been eating that a lot lately, which is probably why my heart's going to stop at any minute.
Oh, no.
No one would say, well, she was the picture of health. What happened? They're going to be like,
she ate greasy food.
She ate fast food every day. What? Well, it was a good run. She was happy chicken. At least.
Yeah, she was happy.
So
things that she liked to do was
eating fried chicken.
Eat fried chicken.
Long walks on the beach and fried chicken. Mm-hmm. What about you? What are you?
Sunday, or what do they call them?
Ooh, a brownie sundae.
Yeah.
That is what I'm all about.
You're making me hungry. So what am I thankful for? Lots of things. I'm thankful that I get to spend time with you and hear you sing every week. Yeah.
People probably think I really sing like that. I'm sorry.
You actually, you sang at my wedding.
I did
if
sing
you
at your
don't
wedding.
Remember that.
I remember. I am almost 73, but I do remember. Oh my gosh, I was so tan and shiny, and I had white hair.
Yeah, white hair.
Good Lord.
That was a vibe.
I'm so sorry about that.
Hey, you've always been beautiful, so hush your mouth.
Stop it. Quit.
So yeah, I'm thankful for you.
Thank you. Why didn't you say to me, change your hair before my wedding? Because I would have done that for you.
I didn't think it was a problem.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that was a thing back then.
You're right. And it was not just blonde.
It was 2006, guys.
And it was underneath, it was dark brown. Mm-hmm. It was the two-tone thing.
That was before you did your dreads, right?
Oh, I wish you would have never said that. Okay, we gotta go. We gotta go. Bye. I never had dreads. I had a dread.
Okay, one dread
and
that
it was
I had
hidden.
To comb out of your hair.
We gotta go. Thanks for listening.
You can cut that out if you.
Oh, the Lord saith, "Come as you are," and here I am.
I won't bring it up ever again.
Okay.
This was great. Let's do it again.
Bye now.
Bye.
Well, thank you for listening to Cousins on Crime. If you're enjoying our podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating so that other true crime fans can find us.
If you have any case suggestions or just want to say hey,
email us at cousensoncrime@gmail.com. And be sure to follow us on Instagram, where we post case photos and information at Cousins on Crime Podcast.